I'm Kevin Bjella. I'm with the Cold Regions Research Lab, and I'm going to present to you guys an idea for climate resilience. I think today was an absolute perfect setup for what I'm going to talk about now. It was not coordinated, but that's the way it worked out. So here we go. Okay, permafrost. Well, we've been talking about, I'm not going to dive into the specifics of it, but the one thing that nobody has talked about is the definition and how poor of a definition it is, from at least from an engineer standpoint, of any earth material at or below freezing for 2 or more years. It doesn't tell you really what the issue is with permafrost, and I think all of us know that it's the ice content, right? So got lots of pictures of ground ice, got a little cartoon in the corner there. There's all sorts of different ground ice, but the bottom line is it makes permafrost very heterogeneous, okay? But I think we can exploit that. It's not, when you look across the terrain, it's not the same everywhere. If you put a building there, you put a building there, putting building there, it's not all the same conditions. There are better places than others. Vlad already went over this. We've got warming permafrost, so I don't need to touch on that anymore. Another thing that really hasn't been talked about too much, at least from an engineer standpoint, we like to keep things really simple. And binary if possible. And in this case, thaw unstable versus thaw stable. And there's a lot of reasons for why soils would become, or a particular permafrost terrain is thaw stable, thaw unstable. I've got some lists of things down below, but the bottom line is that there are better areas than others. Okay, this bottom right picture here, that's Bassett Army Hospital that was built on Fort Wainwright. A 5-story monolithic monster with a steam heat. You've been in buildings with steam heat, 100 degrees in the basement. That thing never had a crack, never had an inoperable window. Everything was fine with it. And it was built on frozen gravel. And then we've got thaw unstable, and we've got this great picture over here on the left to illustrate that. So that's what I'm going to be exploiting here in this talk. We know how to build on permafrost, especially if it's industry or government. We know how to do it. We've got the money. We can make it happen. And generally, life is pretty good. Sometimes things go terribly wrong. I don't think I have Vlad's name. I think every single one of these was probably taken by Vlad, except for that top two. The top middle one there, that's Thule Air Base. It's got about 1 meter of settlement in the floor. Center line spreading up on the right there, that's Goldstream Road in Fairbanks. Bottom left, I think that's Norilsk. I love that picture, whoa, this building's coming down. And then this other, I'm not sure which Russian, what's that? Cherusky, okay. And I think you said that was due to like a water break or something that happened underneath. And then that's behind the GI Institute there. But all these things have one thing in common. Lessons learned. Before I get there, lessons learned. Things I've learned over 35 years of working with permafrost. Often when I come up to one of these degrading structures like this, it's possibly the result of poor engineering. That sometimes is the case. It's not always the case, but often it's the case. Just under engineering, I should say. Not necessarily poor engineering, but under engineering. Very often it's a change in the use. Especially with these DoD structures that I deal with, they constantly get remodeled from one use to another. And the people that do the remodeling don't look back at what the original intent of the permafrost foundation was for. But the biggest thing that I've noticed virtually with everything that I've ever investigated that's got thaw degradation is there's water associated with it in some form, whether it's a water break, or it's poor drainage, or it's naturally derived water from the thawing condition. So that's what I'm going to kind of work off of here. Water impacts, or as a term that I learned, I think from Russian literature, is technogenesis. Kind of like the heat island effect. It's everything that's put together into a community. It's the human impact that causes the genesis of problems. When it comes to water, we've got road and airfield embankments that are blocking water movement. Very clear, no matter where you go in permafrost terrain, you see that all the time. Inadequate structures for drainage. Oftentimes the type of hydrology that's the methodology that's used for hydrology to get water across an embankment that's used in temperate regions does not apply in permafrost terrain. Porous snow removal techniques we see all the time, not only just the piling and then the resulting thawing and the water development, but that the insulation value, that it just greatly retards the intention of getting cold down into the permafrost. Thermokarst under structures. Those of us that went to Point Lay, I don't know about you, the folks that went to Fort Wainwright, I haven't been there before, but at Point Lay, we just saw this over and over and over again. And the thermo erosion bullying that occurs, the water moving across the permafrost terrain and causing the eroding movement. So here's a great picture of Shishmaref. You know, you can see that they obviously have to deal with a lot of water after spring melt. But then this compiling here by Ben Jones, we looked at this structure today very intently, and I don't think any of it, those of us that have not seen that upper picture would be absolutely amazed to see that how flat that was back in 1973. You can't see it because of the little camera thing, but 1974 is that image. So can this be done differently? Okay, I talked earlier about, well, we can make permafrost infrastructure stable, industry, government, but the villages don't have that money. They don't have those resources. So, and we saw that today. You guys probably saw it at Wainwright. But look at this, water's involved in every single one of these pictures. So I'll back up just a little bit. Some contemporary engineering that's dealing right now with trying to understand how we can best allocate money and plan for climate warming. And that's risk versus resiliency, okay? It's not necessarily a new concept, but lately it's taken new connotation. And really what we're looking at is a balance between how much are you going to put in to buy down the risk or accept to pay for the ability for this to be resilient on the backside. And here's a little kind of graph here that I guess maybe the best way that I could explain this is if I was building a structure that say for a flood, okay, and I put just enough money in it to this point right here, functionality, so that it'll meet the 10-year flood criteria. And that's great, everything's fine until right here, this is the 100-year flood that occurs. And it goes down to this critical point here. It drops the functionality because now we've got, say, you know, carpets that are destroyed, walls that are destroyed, perhaps power that needs to be refurbished, all those kinds of things that happen with a flood. So now we got to recover. We're coming back up to, do we just get back to where we were before? Well, no, now we probably throw a little bit more money into it and we try to adapt and then build for that 100-year flood. Well, there's another way to think about this and just remove that 100-year flood. Or in our case, remove one of those risks of permafrost. And can we do that? Is there a way that we can absolutely just take that out of the equation? And can the community be proactive and mitigate to prevent this crisis, simulated crisis? So here's what we do know. We know that infrastructure significantly alters hydrology. That's ubiquitous. Water then is a key driver of permafrost degradation, okay? Ground ice content, I mentioned this before, it's not homogeneous, it's heterogeneous across the terrain. We can exploit that. We have the ability to do high resolution permafrost characterization. It's not super expensive. It does take some effort. It takes a little bit of experience, some SMEs generally. Again, but however, we do know this, the villages don't have a lot of money to do this kind of thing. So is there a balance here? In my opinion, what we need to develop best management practices to minimize permafrost, thermokarst, and permafrost degradation. We first start by doing that by understanding the permafrost in the community. And we do the characterization at a level that everybody's happy with as far as spending money and getting the resolution that's required. And we locate those areas that are good permafrost, bad permafrost, thaw stable versus thaw unstable. Then based on that, we know the areas that are going to generate water upon thawing, those areas that aren't going to generate water, those areas that are going to be used for development, those areas that aren't. and we develop community-wide drainage assessments and try to understand where can we get rid of this water and how. What are the best techniques to do this? Communities do this all the time. You may not know this, but there are extensive drainage plans for every single town probably in the developed world have to deal with drainage water, and Arctic communities don't do it. So maybe it's time that we start doing that. Future development should include detailed planning, where, how much of it occurs, the method to minimize water production, and the method for removing the water. Fortuitously, I found this cool map over in a room over here. So luckily my talk was delayed enough so I could take a picture and put it in here. But somebody at the borough had looked at this is where we went and looked at the Permafrost tunnel. It's right off of this street here. So you can see they've got it laid out very systematically, subdivision type style, but it stops right here. I had to break it up into two pictures so that you guys could see this on slides. But then here's off of Cake Eater Road. They obviously extended it down this way. They totally avoided this really ugly looking area here. And I can only assume why. So they are applying, whoever it was that did this is applying some level of what I'm already talking about. But yet they still have development out here. And as we all know, these are still pretty ugly areas. So how can we go about this? Well, there's permafrost drilling. It's super expensive, but it's very accurate. A lot of times this is done in lieu of other methods. And unfortunately, again, it's very expensive and it's time consuming. We can use geophysics to do this stuff. We do this stuff first, then we ground truth it with the borehole drilling. This right here is a great study that we did with Misha at the Cold Climate Housing Research Center. Here we drilled every 3 meters, sampled every 60 centimeters, and Misha was able to develop this really great map based on that drilling. And then we ran our geophysics. And the only reason I'm showing you guys this is just to prove my point. Because frankly, there's a lot of people out there that still don't believe that geophysics works, okay? But right here, the high red, that's high ice content. The blue and the green, that's low ice content. You can see how well it maps to this. So it works. You can do this expediently at a fairly decent cost. Here's kind of a cartoon aspect of maybe how you would apply it. Might not really apply here in Barrow, where the permafrost is a little bit more continuously high ice content. But you can see here's high ice content here. So at Cold Climate Housing Research Center, they built this sustainable village house up on pilings over that high ice content. But over here where it's very low ice content, then they were able to put it slab on grade. There's kind of your concept of what we're looking at here. This is how you would apply it.
So you mean resistivity or a combination of methods?
Well, resistivity and GPR are pretty good. Yeah, together they're pretty complementary.
2 minutes, Kevin.
Okay. And this here is just a mosaic of permafrost terrain done by Payway back in 1974. But this is what I'm talking about. This is the kind of map that we would create from that information. The last thing that I'm going to talk about is a tool that we're developing with the GI Permafrost Lab. Dmitry and more specifically Sergey Marchenko there at the Permafrost Lab. And you guys heard John Thornley talk about how important it is for the permafrost temperature for engineers, okay? So to put together with what I just talked about with the water and the planning and so forth, this tool here will be used by engineers to forecast permafrost temperature. What he's done is he takes 5 composite models and he averages them and then combines them with borehole temperatures, existing borehole temperatures across the state, and creates this tool. At this time, it was only developed for the North Slope of Alaska, but the idea is that you go in and you pick where you want to understand the permafrost temperature. Here's 1 meter depth, you can pick 2 meters depth, active layer thickness, but then you decide how aggressively you want the climate to be, RCP of 4.5, and then you pick what you're looking at, natural conditions, or is there a gravel pad, different levels of gravel pad with styrofoam, or do you want to pick RCP of 8.5, be a little bit more aggressive, and the same level of conditions on the surface apply there. You hit the button, let it run, And then you run your slider to what year you're concerned about. Is it 20 years out, 50 years out? And you get this. And so here's a map from 2010, run off of this model for the 2 meter and 5 meter depths. And then here's your map for 2100 at the 2 and 5 meter depths. So this is under development. This is going to be on the Arctic Ed, it already is actually on the Arctic Ed's website, which is a revitalization of the Alaska Environmental Atlas, but it's online, and SNAP is doing this, Scott Rupp at the University of Alaska. It's a great thing. This tool will be living there. So there's my proposition for climate resiliency. Let's take this tool and let's look at water more discreetly, and let's find out what permafrost exists in our villages. And Wajnak. Thank you very much.